What if the story of Christ isn't just a tale from the past, but a map of the soul's journey? Carl Jung, a true visionary of human nature, saw in Christianity a profound blueprint for psychological and spiritual transformation, one that doesn't require you to abandon reason but to dive deeper into the mystery of being human. Today, we'll explore how Jung's ideas about symbols, the shadow, and the divine within can help you incarnate the living Christ, not as a dogma, but as a force of wholeness. We'll even unpack how Jesus' battle with the devil in the desert reveals the secret to confronting your darkest self. Let's begin. Jung once said that most of us live in a world of signs, not symbols. A sign is like a street marker. It points to something fixed, known, and finite. When we reduce the cross to a mere emblem of Christianity or a reminder of a historical event, we turn it into a sign. But a symbol is different. A symbol, Jung wrote, points to something essentially unknown, a mystery. The cross, as a living symbol, isn't just about death. It's about the intersection of heaven and earth, human and divine, time, and eternity. Its four beams stretch outward like a compass. Thinking, feeling, sensation, intuition, the four functions of the psyche that tether us to this world. But at the center, where the beams meet, is the still point, the axis where the finite touches the infinite. To let Christ live through you is to stand at that center, where the ego dissolves and the self, the divine spark within, begins to speak. Imagine the cross not as a static object, but as a vortex. The horizontal beam is the plane of human experience, our relationships, struggles, and daily grind. The vertical beam is the axis of transcendence, the channel between the unconscious depths and the heights of spirit. When you integrate these dimensions, when you align your earthly life with that vertical pull, you become a living cross. You don't just admire Christ, you let him reshape your very structure. Jung called this process individuation, the lifelong task of becoming who you truly are. It's not about perfection but wholeness. Think of it as the psychological equivalent of Jesus' crucifixion. On the cross, Christ surrenders his individual will. Not my will, but yours be done. And in that surrender, the divine floods in. Individuation works the same way. Your ego, the part of you that clings to control, status, and safety, must die to make space for the self. This isn't a one-time event, but a daily practice. Every time you choose compassion over resentment, curiosity over judgment, or courage over fear, you're hammering a nail into the ego's coffin. But here's the paradox. The cross is both a scaffold of death and a ladder to rebirth. Jung wrote that the way to the self is through the wound. Your flaws, traumas, and failures aren't obstacles. They're the raw material of transformation. When Paul cries, "I have been crucified with Christ, and it is no longer I who live," he's describing the ultimate act of individuation, the ego's surrender to a higher pattern. Your job isn't just to imitate Christ, but to let his archetype rewrite your DNA. Before Jesus began his ministry, he faced the devil in the desert, a story that's the ultimate manual for shadow work. The desert isn't just a place of physical hunger. It's the arid landscape of the soul, where our unmet needs and repressed desires rise like mirages. The devil offers Jesus three temptations: turn stones to bread, comfort, claim earthly power, control, and test God's protection, certainty. Each temptation targets a facet of the shadow, the part of us we disown because it feels too shameful, too wild, or too vulnerable. Jung said the shadow isn't evil, it's just unconscious. When Jesus refuses the devil's bargains, he isn't rejecting his humanity, he's integrating it. The hunger for bread? It's the fear of scarcity, the part of us that hoards and manipulates. The lust for power? It's the wounded child who craves recognition. The demand for miracles? It's the ego's addiction to specialness. Jesus doesn't battle the devil. He dialogues with him, exposing each temptation as a distortion of a holy need. Man does not live by bread alone, he says, redirecting his hunger toward the sacred. Shadow work isn't about slaying your demons, it's about hearing their whispers and replying, "You shall worship the Lord your God, and him only shall you serve." In other words, your deepest cravings are valid, but they must be oriented toward the divine, not the ego. Your shadow isn't the enemy, it's the unclaimed part of your soul that Christ wants to redeem. When you stop projecting your darkness onto others, when you own your pettiness, your envy, your pride, you begin to see the devil not as a monster out there, but as a lesson to be learned. The desert becomes a sanctuary, the hunger becomes a prayer. Jung was often asked, "Do you believe in God?" His answer was cryptic. He stated, "I don't need to believe, I know." He wasn't talking about dogma, but an experiential knowing of the God archetype imprinted in the psyche, which leads us to the metaphysical God beyond all images, the ineffable mystery that symbols point to but cannot contain. The cross is the bridge between these two realms. When you align with it as a living symbol, you're not just activating a psychological pattern, you're tuning into a cosmic frequency. Think of the God archetype as a radio receiver and the true metaphysical God as the signal. The receiver, your psyche, must be functional, cleared of static, repaired through shadow work to pick up the transmission. But the signal itself is real. Jung wrote, "The self is a God image, or at least cannot be distinguished from one." In other words, the more you integrate your psyche, the more transparent you become to the divine. The cross's vertical beam is your antenna, the horizontal beam is your grounding. When both are aligned, you become a conduit for something older than time. This is why ritual matters. When you meditate on the cross, pray, or partake in communion, you're not just going through motions, you're etching the symbol into your nervous system, wiring your brain to resonate with the archetype. Over time, the boundary between you and God softens. You start to feel Christ's presence not as a separate entity, but as the deepest layer of your being, the I am, beneath the ego's chatter. How do you live this out? Start by seeing the cross in everything. When you're stuck in traffic, the horizontal beam is your irritation. The vertical beam is your breath, anchoring you to the present. When you argue with a friend, the horizontal beam is the conflict. The vertical beam is the love beneath it, waiting to be uncovered. The cross isn't a relic, it's the shape of reality itself. Here's a practice. Each morning, stand with arms outstretched like the cross. Feel the horizontal pull, your plans, fears, and to-do lists. Then sense the vertical current, the still small voice rising from your core. Breathe into that intersection for 1 minute. You're not just visualizing a symbol, you're recalibrating your psyche. And when your shadow erupts, when you snap at a loved one or spiral into self-pity, don't shame yourself. Follow Jesus's desert example. Name the temptation. Are you seeking bread, comfort instead of meaning, power instead of purpose, certainty instead of trust? Write it down. Talk to it. Ask, what holy need is this shadow trying to meet? Then redirect that energy. Bake bread for a neighbor, create art instead of controlling others, or have faith in the Father over fear. That's how the cross becomes flesh. Jung called individuation the Summum Bonum, the highest good. It's not about absolute moral purity. It's about becoming a vessel where opposites collide, human and divine, darkness and light, death and rebirth. The cross is the crucible where these forces fuse. When you let Christ live through you, you're not escaping the world, you're penetrating it with sacred fire. Imagine your life as an ongoing crucifixion resurrection. Every betrayal becomes a lesson in forgiveness. Every failure becomes a seed of humility. Even your doubts become fuel for a deeper faith, one that doesn't cling to answers, but rests in the mystery. This is the peace that surpasses understanding Paul described. It's not passive, it's volcanic. It doesn't remove you from the world, it pulls you into its heart. In the end, the goal isn't to worship the cross, it's to become the cross, to stand at the intersection of time and eternity, grounded in love, open to grace. When you do, you'll find that Christ wasn't just a man who lived 2,000 years ago. He's the blueprint of your becoming, the self you were born to incarnate. If this journey resonates with you, remember, the desert is not your doom. The cross is not your burden. They're invitations to wholeness, to God, to the self you've always been. The Christ alignment is your way into the kingdom of heaven. And remember one of Christ's essential messages from Matthew 6:33. So do not worry, saying, what shall we eat, or what shall we drink, or what shall we wear? For the pagans run after all these things, and your heavenly Father knows that you need them. But seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well. Therefore do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself. Each day has enough trouble of its own. Share your thoughts below, and may your shadows lead you to the light. Until next time, peace be with you.